a PG podcast, but then Devin just kept on dropping shits and fucks, and
I'm just trying to figure out what's in her mouth.
I just want to see him interview Francesco Accoli.
No, he's a good human being, is what he would say about himself, I'm sure.
Who's hosting this thing?
Take charge, Kevin. Would you? Jesus.
First time we ever met those guys. That was the major drunken pub argument.
I think you guys are the worst.
I'm gonna have to probably watch some Canucks hockey, unfortunately.
Just making friends left, right, and center, and probably some enemies as well.
Tell him to shut up. He needs to hear that every once in a while.
Off to a good start.
All right. We are live.
It's okay to talk when it goes live.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at podcast_hockey, live on Facebook, live on YouTube, facebook.com, The Hockey Podcast, youtube.com, The Hockey Podcast. We are currently sitting at the Evan Bouchard of subscribers. So that's there. And also, of course, you can subscribe to wherever you get your audio at the end of the show. We've got, which is, of course, Google, Spotify, Apple, all your friends or families, wherever fine podcasts are podcasted. Hello, everyone. And we say hello to Chris. Good morning / afternoon in the Calgary area. How are you?
pretty well.
Good. Anything going on?
Just work and killing time when I'm at home when I'm not working.
Fair enough.
Another lockdown, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, lockdowns continue, etc. Oh, I'm just trying to. Sorry. Just share this. Hang on. Also, hello, Sean. How are you?
Oh, hello, Kevin. I'm doing all right. It's unfortunately the indoor dining has now been shut down in Alberta, and well, in typical Alberta fashion, it is not patio weather anymore. We had some snow yesterday, and even though it was very, very brief, there was some, and but it's WrestleMania weekend, so Heidi and I are hoping that night 2 of WrestleMania goes forward, because there's definitely some weather concerns. They had a bit of delay last night, and the weather's not getting any better today down in Tampa Bay. So hopefully we'll be able to watch night 2 of WrestleMania tonight.
That's true. Yes, it was. There was a couple of matches that you can see it was quite wet. The ring was, and someone actually slipped. And then they had a cage match as well, which I was actually, not surprised that they had a cage match, because it's wrestling. They have cage match, but some of the stuff that they pulled off last night actually was impressive. And just as a side note, before we say hello to Tyler, the very fact that, and it just probably relates well to hockey in a weird sort of way, the fact that they could perform in front of a fairly sizable audience, it just felt like a relief to the performers that have not been able to do this in over a year. Was 1 year, 1 month, 1 day since they actually performed in front of a live crowd.
Yeah, it was. I welled up a little bit just seeing fans right beside the ring where they normally are. Yeah, they're not as crammed in as they normally would be for event as big as WrestleMania can be, but it was still chills, because watching hockey without fans, watching soccer without fans, watching all these sports without fans, and you just to see people be able to go out there and perform their sport, their entertainment in front of fans is something that we sorely miss, and it's something that I cannot wait till we get to see it becomes a regular occurrence again.
Yes, as Lucas says, we're in the third period. Let's go. Tyler, hello.
Hey guys, I'll just say, doing well, all things considered. You mentioned the indoor dining restriction there, Sean. around here. Now, I want to jinx it, but the forecast for the next week shows sun. We might actually be out of it. The sun is shining this morning. But the last little while, it's been quite wintry here. In fact, we've had snow each of the last number of days, little bits of it, and you got people in their snowsuits outside trying to enjoy the outdoor dining in tents. So it's been an odd time, but we're getting there. Well, you're allowed to be outside, but if you can set up a tent that's outside, it's like outside but not inside. I don't know. I don't get it. But it's still cold.
People are just they're at the end, their wits' end here, I think, and trying to do whatever they can to be social but still responsible. Mm-hmm. And it's funny to watch. I'll pull the curtain back a little bit. Chris sent me a nice picture of him and Hannah at the Pig and Duke patio, but they were all bundled up. Hannah had a nice big blanket on. So the people are just trying to find ways to go out and support local businesses, and not be stuck inside. So we're at the end of winter where people are itching to do that in normal years. Mm-hmm. Here in Calgary, you have the Ship and Anchor, where every time it's above zero, you have people out on the patio. And now that's every restaurant and pub that can have a patio is having a patio now, because it's the only way to bring people into their restaurant. So as long as you're being responsible, I have no issues with people trying to be creative with trying to make things enjoyable outside, even if it is a little snowy.
Yeah, I get it. I'm chuckling by that idea, because it's inventive. And I saw in Edmonton too, it like really snowed too, like just didn't little snow, it really snowed. So but I before we get into everything here, all things with this, I think I think everyone is just even from Twitter, everyone is just exhausted now.
Yeah, it's really showing in the conversations online. I think for sure, people are really on edge and can't wait for this thing to be over.
Whether you fully believe in trying to follow the rules, or whether you believe it's a hoax, like everyone's just kind of at full COVID fatigue at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not a political show, but for the love of God, can we just move with the vaccines right now? I feel like are they like the Calgary Flames as they move the puck up the offensive zone. They are still standing behind the net, waiting for a play to develop. Can we move? Can we move a little bit more towards the Connor McDavid of moving the vaccines?
No. Well, I think everybody's hearing that message, so I hope they're trying their best.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone is. But we'll start with the good news in Vancouver Canucks land. But this is going to hit some controversy as well. The Vancouver Canucks are scheduled to be back on the ice today after being off for 2 weeks, and their COVID restrictions and schedule. So they're scheduled to be on the ice today if all things go well. And they are scheduled, their first game is scheduled Friday against the Edmonton Oilers, who they have some things to say in terms of a schedule, but 19 games in 31 days. Boy, did Vancouver Canuck Twitter just love that. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to start here. I'll start and we'll go Tyler and then around. I'm going to be unpopular in Canucks Twitter because I know, if you're following the Canucks, you should rage about some of these things. But I didn't have a problem with the schedule as big of a problem. For one thing, you knew that this was going to happen. They were going to have to pile a bunch of games in here as much as possible. They worked with the Players Association with how they were going forward. If you heard the press conference with Dr. Jim Bovard and Jim Benning on Friday, he talked about how they were working with the NHL had a doctor, the NHLPA had a doctor. They knew this was all coming. And the other part of this is, while this is a bit of a pile-on schedule, and it's a very unusual circumstance, and there's a couple of certainly some clips that we can get into here, the way that they scheduled this actually isn't that bad. Specifically, when you look at the end, when they have a home and home, the Vancouver and Calgary have a home and home. You can't cancel games if you're not mathematically eliminated yet. I don't think the players would have wanted that. And they fixed some things to work that should things be mathematically eliminated, they can remove those games if possible. I think the NHL, all things considered, did a good job. In my personal opinion, I know that this is not going to be a popular opinion.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely agree with all that there, Kevin. I had to put on Twitter yesterday, people try calm down, a couple things. One is that there's only 7 days a week. And look, it's a big business, and they are going to do everything they can to meet all the business obligations. And there is quite a bit there around sponsorship and broadcasting, et cetera, to playing the full schedule. But I mean, and why are we assuming they are going to play all 19 games? Like I think if there's no relevance to those last couple against the Flames, they'll just cancel them. Nobody wants to be involved in something that means nothing. And are they going to be playing out the string just to determine the draft lottery odds? I mean, that's kind of an odd thing if it gets to that point where it's like, well, we're going to play to see who can lose to improve their lottery odds. Like that, I don't. I'm sure they can figure that out with points percentage, or maybe it won't even matter. There'll be enough separation between the two in the standings that it actually won't even matter. But it is what it is. Everybody knew in this COVID season that there could be delays and cancellations and postponements, or whatever phrase you want to use. It's a difficult situation, but I find it a little bit frustrating that you've got people that are begging the team to sell at the deadline and look towards next year and start planning for the draft, and then they're complaining about the unfairness of the schedule. I mean, a tough schedule should actually ensure that the Canucks bottom out, because it is going to be very tough competitively. The main concern, of course, is safety, and I'm sure the players and the PA have raised the issue of the crammed schedule and risks of injury, and what if there's a long-term one that comes as a result of playing so often. But those are all hypotheticals.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is going to try and say that the whole schedule thing moving forward is ideal, but to Kevin's point, they made the best of a shitty situation, in my opinion. So I ultimately am going to side with Kevin here and say that, yeah, like they did the best they could, and like we've already talked about, if we end up being mathematically eliminated, then they'll just cancel those games with the Flames.
Yeah, I'm not as certain that that's what they're going to do at the end of this. At the end, they've set it up for potential there, with the times not being determined yet. But I'm not as certain that's the A plan if they are mathematically eliminated. I wonder, and I think there's nothing out there that makes me think this, other than just me just thinking and maybe scheming and tinfoil hat thing. Maybe they do bring back the old draft lottery for this upcoming season, if they have to do that, this upcoming draft lottery, because if they have to cancel games, and if there's, say, the Canucks and Flames are battling out for 12th and 11th and 12th, the right on the border of what would be available to get the first overall pick. I think that might be something that they think about as well. But in terms of the schedule, it's about as good as I think you could have expected. Again, they were not going to cancel games outright at this early on. The Canucks, Flames, hell, even the Senators are still mathematically in the playoff race. Realistically, that's a completely different debate. But until they're mathematically eliminated, you cannot cancel games. It would look so bad. Like, this was a no-win situation for the NHL, and I think we need to start. I know we talked about everyone's at the end of their rope, and with all this, but it's time to show. We still need to be able to show some patience and some understanding that it's not just black and white whether or not you play games or don't play games. When you look at the back-to-backs, the Canucks have 2 back-to-backs that are at home. So no travel. They've got 1 back-to-back that's in Winnipeg, but both against Winnipeg. So no travel again. They got 1 that is Edmonton and Calgary. Not that bad of the travel. 1 that is Ottawa, Toronto. Not that bad. And they got the home and home with Calgary at the end. I think they got as good of a schedule as they could have. You can argue whether or not they should be playing those last 2 games. I think that's a fair argument to have, but at this point, the NHL was not going to outright cancel games until they know who's in and who's out. Montreal hasn't been playing great of late, and they've fallen off, and you don't know what they're going to do over the end of the year. You don't know what Calgary is going to do. We'll get into them later on. And then it's a complete mystery box with the Canucks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the majority of the team got COVID. I don't know how many players actually got the symptoms and how many players were more asymptomatic. We don't know how well these players are going to come out of this and what shape they're going to be in. We can make guesses based off of the information or misinformation that's out there on what this disease does to you, but you still don't know. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I think this is what the NHL had to do. They did a pretty good job at putting together a schedule that isn't too arduous, but still gets all the games in. And you just have to go out and enjoy watching hockey. I know it sounds silly to say just go out and enjoy watching hockey, but that's at this point, instead of going off and having just getting upset about all this. Just at what point are we just being upset for the sake of being upset? And at what point should we just sort of look at that and go, okay, let's try and take the emotion out a bit and see how well, and I understand why they did this. They are a business. Their business is putting on hockey games. Their business is to put on a full season that they said they would for their sponsors and their partners. So one of those home and home games is going to be a Hockey Night in Canada game. That's a national game at the end of there. So if they cancel those games, I don't know what the agreement is with Rogers, and as well as any of the sponsors involved in the Flames, Canucks, and Rogers, in terms of maybe monetary payback or what. So it's such a tough position to be in, and I hope that we get to see a significant amount of hockey going forwards from the Canucks, and hopefully they are able to be competitive at the very least in these games.
It's a very good point that John brings up about, wanting to watch some hockey. I mean, for a lot of fans, I mean, we're among the hardcores here that are really into it, at a deep level. But for other people, they just want to cheer on their team. They want to see them play. In a time like this where there isn't as many other things that you're allowed to do, being able to see the Canucks on the TV is still important for people, regardless of where the standings are at. They want to see their heroes play. They want to see, Quinn Hughes do his thing, and hopefully we'll get to see Elias Pettersson pretty soon after they get back to playing. So that's important. The maintenance days were a thing in the Alain Vigneault era of coaching the Canucks, and I think with how crammed in it is, we could be seeing some different people getting a shot. rotating people through and some maintenance days for people, because otherwise, burnout factor, I think is going to be a real thing for guys, especially if they're nicked up a little bit.
Yeah.
Not only that, but like coming back from COVID, conditioning is going to be an issue as well. So that just compounds that issue.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know what condition all the players are in, who got it really bad. Like we got a little bit of glimpse into that with what Michaela Gaudette was putting out there onto Twitter about Adam, but we don't know who else got it and how bad they got it. We don't know how. We don't know anything. It's just a lot of it is just based off of what we think we know from social media and as well as traditional media. So unless you have had it and you are a super in shape person, athlete, there's a lot of us aren't going to be able to put to like 2 and 2 together and figure out how they're going to react. And even then we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm at the point where I'm just like, I just want to watch hockey. Maybe you can call me selfish or whatever, but I just want to watch some Canucks hockey and enjoy some escapism at this point, because I've gotten to the point where it's really tough to try and entertain myself on Twitter and social media like I used to. And
yeah.
I'm now ready just to watch some Canucks hockey again and hopefully see some good plays, and some good games.
Well, you talk about like let's be everyone that's calling out the unfairness of the Canucks schedule. If you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, they're playing 4 games in 6 nights the rest of the season. That's the run that they are on for the rest of the year. And that's because of COVID. And again, we know that there was a couple of players affected there. What about the Edmonton Oilers, who last night played a game against the Calgary Flames after their memorial service for Colby Cave? And now, to be fair, I did not know that there was that they didn't have the memorial service yet for Colby Cave, but that is a valid schedule frustration for the Oilers as well, that this was scheduled. And I don't know the whole details of that, but like, it's not only, my point is, it's not only, this isn't like, we're not putting on a tinfoil hat and say we are out to get the Vancouver Canucks now. This schedule bump has hit everybody.
Yeah.
And I don't think many people are actually saying they're out to get the Canucks or anything. I think it's just more pure outrage in terms of, well, it has to do with COVID, so people are being purely outraged about that, and the why are we playing games if we're this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, well, if that's your reasoning, then we should just cancel games every season once the teams are eliminated. Like, to me, that's how it comes across. And I know that's not how they mean it, but that's how it comes across. So I think it's just, like I said, I think they've done a decent job at creating this schedule in a tough position. We may see games get canceled at the end because the final 2 are against Calgary. So I could see those final 2 getting canceled at the end if worse comes to worse, and they don't matter at all, other than maybe potentially some draft lottery implications. But I don't know. I just think I think we need to just look at this and go, well, we get to watch hockey, and we get to watch our team play hockey, and talking about the rotating players in. Yeah, I think there is. I think they should be looking at doing that, especially for players like Ole Juolevi, Cole Lind, who is now on the taxi squad because he came up to Vancouver to rehab a broken finger. And those are 2 players that you want to get a look at going into this summer and understanding what you have with them and whether or not you want to be using a protection spot for the expansion draft on. So there's a lot of stuff that you can look at, and even if the games quote unquote don't matter, there's a lot of stuff that you can glean and learn from these games for the Canucks. Like I said, Juolevi, Brogan Rafferty is someone I want them to give a few games to get him some NHL looks. Cole Lind is someone I want to see get more looks. I want to see them find a way to see more from Niels Hoglander. See what there's a lot of young players that could potentially use this as a bit of a test run. What am I trying to say?
Audition for next year.
Audition. There you go. That's the word. Audition for next year.
Gotcha. There's fun.
Yeah. It's not just about what playoffs or no playoffs now. It's a little bit of everything. Like you got to find a way to take a look at these players because, as I said, you've got the expansion draft coming up. What are they going to do with that? Because now it looks like they've said that they have a verbal agreement with Tanner Pearson that he's going to be protected at the expansion draft. So that takes another one away. They've got one or two spots left, depending on where you sit on a couple players to make a decision on.
So let's transition into that. Another thing that Canucks Twitter united and joined together, the contract signing of Tanner Pearson, 3 years, 3.25 average contract. We'll start with Chris and then go Tyler, Sean on this. Chris, we'll get your thoughts. What are your thoughts on this Tanner Pearson signing? And I didn't even see you tweet about it. So this brand new content from Chris, fresh out of the YouTube.
Just based off of what I saw you guys say in our group chat, I actually pretty much share your guys' same opinion that the general consensus opinion that it seems like most of Canucks Twitter generally has, in that it's too much for what he brings. Like, yes, he is like a solid middle six guy who's going to help contribute, but just like Beagle, just like Roussel, it's too much for his age, the context of his contract situation and all that. Like, ideally you would have wanted that to be like in like the 2 to 2.5, maybe a 2-year deal instead of a 3-year deal. So ultimately I think everyone else is going to be in agreement in that it's probably a little too much, and just goes to prove any of the Benning haters right now are only going to feel more emboldened by this move.
Before Tyler, before you go, just if anyone has any comments or questions, I keep forgetting to do that. Please do that. We'll answer them throughout the show. Now, sorry, Tyler.
Absolutely. If you look at the deal in isolation, I think it's a reasonable deal for a guy of his caliber and resume. Of course, he's a Stanley Cup winner. His chemistry with Bo Horvat, both on and off the ice, it means a lot to the organization. But it's one thing to look at the signing in isolation. When you start looking at the broader picture and what they've been doing over the last number of years, I'm a guy that really likes veteran presence, but it is getting to the point here where there's too much fixation on intangibles, right? I mean, at some point you have to say, okay, the intangibles are important, but we do have a young core. This is our group, and we're handing the reins to them, and it seems like still there's some reluctance to really just let the young core, Horvat, and then the guys after him take the reins here. And I don't know, why that is. I mean, we've gone around in circles on this podcast over many weeks, months. It seems like about ownership's influence on the decisions, and I think this is another example of that. Where, if Jim Benning was not in a position that's secure for continuing on into next year, I don't know if these kinds of moves would be made. The other part of it too is with Tanner Pearson. I mean, I know Benning at his midseason media availability signaled then that they had plans to talk with Pearson about re-signing, but once he had his injury, that really, hampered the ability to make a decent trade. So perhaps the thinking as well was, let's re-sign him and go from there. So I don't know. I know a lot of people are furious at it, but it's also at the point where they could acquire a superstar player and there'd still be complaints about the term or no trade clauses or whatever. It's just that's a Canucks Twitter thing to do now.
Canucks Twitter will Canucks Twitter.
Yeah.
I like Tanner Pearson as a player. I think he's a good middle six forward. I think that the Canucks are better with him than without him. It's just the term, it's the price, it's it's all the other deals that the Canucks have signed. They've got they've got Brandon Sutter, who's making 4.375 on the cap. Antoine Roussell's making 3. It's a very expensive bottom 6 that the Canucks have put together, and that's the issue. Like if this signing was done and they didn't have Louis Eriksson taking up space, and they didn't have even just one of Sutter and Beagle taking up over $7 million in cap space, then that's a lot of cap space that they can. If this deal becomes a lot less problematic, but at some point you have to start looking at it going, we've made these signings before, they haven't worked out. At what point do we have to start thinking of a different direction? And yes, it's good to have veteran presence and intangibles, but if you're overpaying for that constantly and it's not actually working out and you're just not making the playoffs consistently, and it might actually be hindering the development of the younger players because you're not allowing them to grow into more bigger voice roles in the locker room, I think it's time to reassess. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's what's happening, and I think that's the biggest frustration for me, is that this seems like it could be another Antoine Roussel signing, another Jay Beagle signing, another Brandon Sutter signing, where it's a year too long and then within about $1 million too high in cap for where this team is. But he's also coming off of a season where he put up 21 goals and 45 points in 69 games. That's a fantastic season. I don't think Tanner Pearson got nearly enough credit for the season he put together last year.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Canucks go into next year with Pearson, Horvat, and Hoglander as a line, and then you've got Podkolzin coming in that you can slide into the third third line and bring him along a little slower, or even swap Hoglander and Podkolzin, you're starting to build some depth. My only issue is that you still need a third line center that can play with one of those younger players. And where are they going to get that? Because Gaudette hasn't proven that he can be a third line center that you can trust without sheltering minutes. Jay Beagle looks like he's injured for a while. Brent, are you bringing back Brandon Sutter, who was basically an offensive black hole for the majority of his time here in Vancouver after he got injured? Like where is this third line center coming from? And that's one of the big things first thing I thought when I saw this Tanner Pearson signing was, well, there goes the whatever cap room they had to maybe try and go out and get a third line center. So, because we talk about the Canucks have the young core. They've got the Pettersson, they've got Horvat, Besser, Quinn Hughes. Thatcher Demko's now your go-to starter for the next 5 years. Like they've got that core, but you still have to build around it. And one of the I think for me a key piece is that third line center, because if you can find the third line center that can create a top 9 where you can stop feeding Bo Horvat to the Wolves and in matchup minutes and allow him to thrive more offensively, like we know he can, then it's better for the team. So I don't know. Maybe there's the way Benning talked on 650. It sounds like there's some more cap coming off the books than we are expecting this summer. So whether that is some more LTIR stuff with maybe Beagle, there was rumors that whatever he's injured with is unfortunately career threatening for him. Does that mean that Louis Eriksson's going home to Sweden and retiring, and we're getting $6 million off the books there? I'll believe it when I see it.
What about a Ferland buyout?
Well, Ferland's on the LTIR right now, anyways, right?
Yeah.
So he's not counting against LTIR is a completely
Don't get Sean going on LTIR.
LTR is an absolute monster, man. You don't know, because you have to work the numbers perfectly to get all that everything there. But he's technically not on the roster, not counting against the cap while being on off-season LTIR. So I don't. But you still have to get to the cap to really be able to access that extra cap space you get from him. So I don't know. I don't think it's as bad as the Roussel. Even Roussel's deal when he signed it, I didn't mind it, but he got injured and he hasn't been the same player since that knee injury. Brandon Sutter was the same thing. Like he had a bad knee injury and hasn't been the same since. Beagles was not great, and Louis been an absolute anchor since he got signed. Like, we're talking about the guy who scored on his own net in his first game as a Canuck. Like, and it didn't get better. So when you've got all those anchors on there, and some of them are Benning's bed that he has to lie in, some of them are bad luck, but they're still anchors, and you still have to, like, at what point do you look at that and go, okay, I can't spend the money on a Pearson. It's a luxury I can't afford right now because of this. So I think it's, for me, I don't know. I don't know what to expect going next year and coming into this offseason. I don't have I don't have confidence in Jim Benning to make the right moves. He's proven, in all his track record says to me, is that he's gonna pay a premium for stuff that you don't necessarily need to pay a premium for. And I said, but I don't know. I'm not at the point, and I don't think I'll ever get to the point where I feel like this move is the straw that breaks the camel's back, and we should be screaming and yelling and getting mad at people who aren't fully on board of this is the darkest timeline ever. Part of Canucks fandom, but other people are there.
To me, there's a couple of issues, I guess, that come through. I understand not trading Tanner Pearson, because we'll get to that in terms of what the Canucks are going to do in the trade deadline. I would imagine that Tanner Pearson didn't want to move right now, which is fair. I mean, I think based on what some of the forwards are out there, I think if everything changed a little bit, if things were different, I think that you probably could have got a reasonable acquisition for Tanner Pearson. Not a franchise-altering one, but you probably could have got a pretty reasonable acquisition for him. What I don't get, and my two big problems here is, first of all, like, if you're having if this is a top six forward, he needs to not be scoring one goal in the last 12 games. He scored one against Ottawa, and then he went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 games between his goal February 15th and March 15th, one in Calgary, one at home to Calgary, one in Ottawa. Like, we do need a little bit more production from Tanner Pearson going forward. If you want him like that, fine. My issue is you also gave him expansion protection. And I don't think as much as you may think that Tanner Pearson is a top 6 forward in this team, I don't think that this is a guy that I am surprised you were considering protecting Tanner Pearson. I'm sure I love intangibles too, but there's nothing there that tells me that Tyler Mott couldn't do what Tanner Pearson does. Really, like that's my problem, is that he gave so much into what Tanner Pearson was that he didn't. That I'm confused by how he valued Tanner Pearson that much. And I also think, in a lot of ways, I think that this is the couple of other things that really bother me about this as well. This is really interesting of what they're going to give at Pettersson and Hughes going forward. That's one thing. I'm not saying that they should, break the bank, but it's pretty clear that they're not going to break the bank. But again, Travis Green is still a lame duck coach with 19 games to go. I am baffled by how that's being handled. And we'll get to Benning's comments on 650, how they want to keep the entire coaching staff. That's great, but they still aren't signed. And that's, to me, a big problem.
the whole coaching staff, and you can argue about whether some like Newell Brown and the power play, whether or not the forwards need a new voice. Baumgartner on the blue line. But Travis Gray needs to be extended and Ian Clark needs to be extended. And the fact that they still haven't done that I agree to Kev, it's baffling. And the fact that it's the figuring out what you can spend money on and what you can't. And the fact that they're spending money on Tanner Pearson, who, like I said, he put up a 20 and 40 season last year. Yeah, he has had a shit season this year comparatively, but he's still on pace for a 15 goal season. That's nothing to scoff at. Yeah. It's not the production you want from a top six forward. He's definitely not there, but he's still not a plug out there.
He's still a serviceable middle six guy.
Is he a guy that you're protecting in the expansion draft?
Oh God, no! Again, I don't. From what I've heard and read, expect that is more of a verbal thing. But the fact that they're still willing to do that verbal, say we are going to protect you, says a lot. The Canucks were in a position where they could have found a way to where they were before this verbal agreement. They could have found a way to make it almost impossible for Seattle to not take Cap off their hands. And now they're gonna have to make a decision on a young player and hope that and leave them exposed and hope that they don't get picked and hope that Seattle does take some Cap off their hands, because at this point, like, what I don't know, I'm at the point where I just, like, it is what it is, and we'll see what happens. I disagree with how all of this has gone down, and like I said, I like Tanner Pearson as a player, but under the current circumstances that the Canucks are in, why are they signing Tanner Pearson to a 3-year deal over $3 million before A, you've signed Pettersson and Hughes, B, you haven't taken care of your coaching, and I think a lot of people want that done as soon as fucking possible, and C, you don't know what the market's going to look like. Like, there's a good chance that we look at after free agency's done, and we look at this Tanner Pearson deal, and at people and players who were comparable are getting $1 million less on only 1 to 2 year deals. So you've overpaid on both term and cap again. Mm-hmm. So it's just, I really hope that there's one or two things shoes that are going to drop that's going to open up cap space for this team in this offseason that we don't know, because otherwise they're in some major cap hell here, worse than last year. Yeah,
and Jim Benning declared in his media availability that he thinks they're actually in a good situation with the cap this offseason. So, the cynics can say that that's just stupid and delusional, but to me, it signals that they're going to be parting ways with a couple of guys that are fairly expensive. So how they accomplish that, I don't know. It is a bit of a wait and see thing. But, again, why are we here at this point? Well, regardless of what the plan is, or if there's a plan, or how detailed the plan is, I think it's fairly safe to say that the performance of a lot of the guys in the last couple of years here that they saw as part of the plan hasn't panned out for them, and now they're in a position of weakness. It's constant with this regime here that they're trying to make deals. Like trades from a position of weakness. They're trying to sign free agents from a position of weakness, and then you end up overpaying as a result of that. They're never in a position of strength. The only exception to that really is the Nate Schmidt acquisition, because Vegas was in the position of weakness with their cap situation that, the Canucks were able to get a good deal there. So, the Canucks are looking at this Tanner Pearson situation and saying, well, if we don't re-sign him, we can't realistically trade him. He's going to go for nothing if we don't re-sign him. We can't have that happen. Otherwise, it's another hole in their depth chart. And so here he is, and this is the price you pay. I mean, I think people need to try to remember that unless you're a Canadian team that's really a contender, like the Canucks were 10 years ago, you're going to have to pay a little more to get free agents to stay there, because there's a lot of other places that are preferable to play than in a Canadian market with the microscope and all the hoopla around hockey.
But to counter that point, though, do you not think that there would have been a possibility to give? Is there another player better than Tanner Pearson out there that you could have given a 3-year, 3.25 AAV overpay to?
Yeah, but there's no guarantees you're going to be able to land that player. You could end up holding nothing, right? I mean, and that's kind of how last offseason went. They had guys, they had like Tanev and Markstrom, and they couldn't re-sign them. Tyler Toffoli as well. And then what did they replace them with? Not much there either. It was kind of, it was like a bit of musical chairs, and they were kind of the last one standing. And they can't have that situation unfold again, for sure.
Just to tie this a little bit into more of this discussion, but going back to the schedule, one of the bonuses that we're going to get with all these back-to-backs, we're going to see more Holtby. And if you're of the mindset that, yes, they're not mathematically eliminated, but realistically the Canucks are eliminated from playoff contention, then you want Holtby playing, and you want him playing well, because if you can find a way to get to find a home for him elsewhere and get that 4.3 off the cap next year, whether at Seattle or another team, there we go. There's some cap room that a shoot a drop for cap room that we're not expecting.
Yeah,
that'll open things up for the Canucks.
Well, that leads to a couple questions here. Daniel asks, do you think there'll be any more trades or signings for the Canucks coming up? For me, I don't expect. Benning basically said that. We'll get into the comments of 650 here in a moment, but I don't expect the Canucks to be doing anything at the trade deadline. I think there's a lot of players that just, like as an example, Brandon Sutter, I think will not move right now. He's just considering the situation. The right human thing to do here is not move anybody.
The only player that I think could move, Kev, would be Jordy Ben. He did not have it during this one. I think he got it back. He was one that kept JT Miller out of the lineup for the first couple games back in January. He didn't get it. So if there's anyone that moves, it'll be Jordy Ben. But I think you're right in the fact that I think the Canucks are not going to be making a move at the deadline.
If they do make any moves, they won't be of significance, maybe involving depth players. I don't see any bigger moves at this point either.
So you don't see this. Holtby and Virtanen to the Leafs for a third, fifth, and Freddie. Canucks retain 50% of Holtby's salary for this year. This sounds plausible when the Leafs get a goalie to back Jack with Cup win.
Well, first off, from what I understand, I don't think you can only retain salary on 1 year of a contract. You have to retain on both. So I don't know how palatable that is for Aquilini. And yeah, but no, I don't see that happen. Both Holtby and Virtanen both were part of the 19-20 some players that got put on COVID protocol, whether or not they've tested positive or were asymptomatic or actually had symptoms or not. We don't necessarily know, but I don't see that happening. Maybe in the maybe something like that in the off season, or I don't know, but I don't see it happening by the deadline on Monday.
Given the situation this season with the Leafs, I don't see them parting with Freddie Anderson. I know Jack Campbell is playing lights out, but the Leafs have pretty big aspirations for a deep playoff run this year, and they cannot go into it without the security of having Freddie Anderson still. So, yeah, that part of the proposed deal there, I don't see happening. And I know there's some media speculation about the Leafs being fairly active in the trade deadline, but of course that's always the case because of Toronto biases. I personally think the Leafs, if they're going to do anything further than what they've already done, it'll be some tweaking around the edges, but I think they're pretty happy with the group they have going into the playoffs.
The idea behind that trade, where the Leafs are picking up a goaltender that, like, I don't think they're sold on Jack Campbell. It's a great story, 11 straight wins. It's taken them basically all year to play 11 games, though. Like and Freddie Anderson's hurt. Jack Campbell's fighting through something, because how many times has he won a game and then not played the next day or the next game because of an injury? Hasn't even dressed, and they've had to dress Hutchinson and they're like their fourth string goalie, right? So I think they're definitely someone who a team that's going to be looking at a goaltender going forwards, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to be something. I don't think it's going to be as big a deal as what Parallax Prophecy brought up.
Yeah,
it's good to see old Parallax again.
I just want to quickly double back before we get too far away from the whole coach situation and the fact that they haven't been signed yet. Do we think that this is potentially a Aquilini liquidity issue as far as his money is concerned? Because that obviously, like, signing coaches does not have anything to do with the salary cap.
I think that to begin with, yes, but the fact that they've signed Demko and Pearson, I think the purse strings have definitely loosened. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some announcements of coaching signings within the next couple weeks here. It would really calm down the market. And I think Aquilini is starting to see how angry and frustrated and just almost apoplectic the Canucks parts of the Canucks fan base are right now. And I think he's gonna find a way to try and calm them down with some signings like that. But yeah, I don't know for sure, but I think the liquidity question was definitely one to start the season. But the fact that they've made these signings with Demko and Pearson, to me, says that the purse strings have opened a little bit, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see Ian Clark and Travis Green extended, or they wait till the end of the year and they make some coaching changes. Ian Clark and Travis Green stay, but the assistants get changed.
I was just going to say, I was just thinking about when you asked this question, I was thinking about the conversation we had with Dick Nazar and Jamie Dodd from former Canucks Central, now not Canucks, different Canucks Central now, but it's now Bick and the boss. But I personally wonder if Travis is playing a little bit of hardball, and I wonder if Ian Clark is playing rightfully playing a little bit of hardball. You look at the situation out there, Torts doesn't have a contract. Brindamore doesn't have a contract. The Kraken coaching position is still available. There are a number of positions. Dominic Ducharme is an interim. I'm not saying he's going to Montreal, by the way, but Dominic Ducharme is an interim coach in Montreal. There are situations out there that Travis can explore that I wouldn't be surprised if this is partially Travis as well. It's just baffling to me that this hasn't been done.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Kevin. The thing is, if you're an owner, priorities, obviously the players are fairly high priority compared to the coaching staff, and there's no time pressure around the trade deadline. I think it's entirely possible ownership and the coaching staff have an understanding that, yes, we would like to bring you guys back. We intend to bring you back, but we need to get to the end of the season to have a better idea of what the economics are going to be for the next couple of years. So I think there is a degree of, under the current real world circumstances, that they want to take their time before they make a decision on dollars for coaching staff. And with players, with the salary cap, and you're going to have to be spending on the players, and so that's become the priority. What is interesting, though, is that usually where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's leaks from agents and stuff, and there's just been like nothing as far as updates on where things are at with those coaches. So I think it's a valuable point, Kevin, that perhaps some of these guys that could be that are up for a contract renewal might be playing hardball a little bit.
I just did a quick search of a friend of the show, Rick Dollywall's tweets on Twitter, because he's usually good at updating everyone on stuff like that. And all of it's been very quiet. So I don't know what exactly that means, whether they're waiting for the, because I don't think that I think the part of this is market. I think what you said with Tortorella, Tocchet, Brindamore,
Yeah.
and then you've got the Kraken coaching vacancy. I think there's definitely a market. They're going to be setting a bit of a new bar for coaches and a new market for coaches with this one, and I think that might be a little bit of as well. But I think a lot of it is just it's the economics of we're in a pandemic, we're not getting money in, we don't know what next season looks like at this point. So they're I think that was part of the reason. But at what point do you punted the ball downfield and next thing you know someone else has grabbed it, right? Yeah. So at some point you have to make a decision, and I think the time is coming real close here.
Just before, I know we got a couple of questions here. Just a couple of questions about what the Leafs are going to do. We are going to get into everyone else a little bit later on and what the North is going to do here a little bit later on. So stick with us here. We're just diving through what happened with the Canucks here with them. We will get through the rest of the North soon, including the Leafs. Yes, including the Leafs. Just one more very quick question, though, and this got some Canuck fans a little riled up when Jamie McLennan said that Mitch Marner was better than Elias Pettersson. If you listen to the whole context, Ray Ferraro actually did not disagree with Jamie McLennan. Actually, if you listen to that, and I think that was more in part of what the context of that hit was what you're paying Pettersson and Hughes, and that is going to be. We'll dig into this a little bit more, but I think it's going to be interesting. What all of this is telling me is what they are trying to offer Pettersson and Hughes is going to be more. That off-season story is going to be the most interesting Canucks off-season story for sure.
Well, yeah, they got Demko signed, and I think that to a solid contract. Hopefully, they're able to get Petey and Hughes signed as well. And before we move on, I just want to talk a little bit about what Bennings has said on the radio.
I got the quote here. Just give me a quick second.
There is a couple quotes that caught my eye. One, which one are you bringing up there, Kev?
Give me a quick second here as I Ron McLean my way through this.
Yeah, Brian, do we have that clip? No, we don't. Okay.
Yeah. It's the you win with the guys that are from 23 to 24 to 34 year olds. That's the window.
Yeah, and I actually did some quick research on that with everything, and I found I went through and got all the Cup winners from the first lockout onwards, and I looked at what their core looked like, and the core is a little more subjective, especially once you get back into the 2006 through 9 range, because you try to remember who was actually good. who these teams were built around, especially that Carolina team. I'm going Eric Stahl and
Glenn Wesley.
That blue line. There was no one on that blue line. But I'll share what I got. And it was really interesting to see what we have here. So you can see what everyone's average age and the core average age. So my core average age could be subjective based off of who you pick to be part of that team's core every time. But you look at it, and you've got one team's average core. Detroit was over 30. Boston's was over 30 as well. Chicago slightly over 30 as well. But you've also got Pittsburgh in 09 under 25. LA was dead on 25, but the average is 27. Now, I also looked at this year's Canucks team, and hold on, there we go. So their average age is 26, just 26.7, but their core is under 25. So if you look at the core average age, they've still got a few years before they're starting to look at the closing of the window for this core. Mm-hmm. But you still have to surround it with the right people and the right players, and that's where everyone is arguing and everyone's concerned about with Jim Benning and what he's done. So I really do think that we need to find a way to that he needs to find a way to fix that, or the Canucks need to find a new GM. Otherwise, they're going to waste this core.
And sorry.
So I think what he said in that it's 24-34, I think is correct. I think there's nothing wrong with what he said. It's the fact that he's now with that comment and what he's doing with what he's done with Pearson. I feel like he's punting on next season, and I don't like that. You're wasting another year. You need to start finding ways to take incremental steps forward, learn from your mistakes, and take incremental steps forwards. And this Pearson contract doesn't feel like he's learning from the mistakes he's made in the past.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it in the group chat. Do they think they're mistakes? Right? Like I think that's the important thing. Is I don't see them feeling like paying a bit more for veteran presence, especially if they've won the Stanley Cup before. I don't think they look at that like a mistake. I don't think they look at Jay Beagle as a mistake signing. I don't think they're looking at this Pearson thing like a mistake.
And that's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, if that is their thinking, well, the track record certainly shows that their vision for how these guys are going to fit with the core hasn't panned out the way they thought it would.
Sorry, I will have to interrupt. It looks like there has been a tweet from NHL PR. And it's not good news, unfortunately.
I'll hold up. Yeah, unfortunately, it looks like there's another positive test with the Canucks. So they've canceled their opening their practice facilities today. So don't know what this means for the schedule that they have set forth and everything. So.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring this up in our earlier discussion about the schedule, but people are complaining about it, and other teams are too, with games rescheduled affecting their teams. But what if there's more? Like, goodness gracious.
Yeah. Well, Ottawa, Ontario, today announced 4,400 new cases. So, which, I mean, I'm weary of the numbers, but let's just hope everybody is okay.
And I just want to say, just for everyone out there, we are going through and talking a lot about the non-COVID parts of things. But first and foremost, we all want the players to be safe, healthy coming out of this. We don't want anything bad or extend like anything to continue on past this. So first and foremost it's players' health and safety.
So we'll get to hi HT to Daniel, who pointed that out in the comments as well. So where were we?
Well, I think let's move on to the Flames.
Okay, so the Calgary Flames split up their couple a bit. Now, to be fair, I do think if you're an Oilers fan or you're an Oilers follower, there's a lot of beef of how that schedule was. We talked about that earlier. But the Calgary Flames split up Monahan and Gaudreau, and I believe that this was the first time that both Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau scored. I want to say in a game, 5-on-5 or not this year. Jacob Markstrom got the shutout. The Calgary Flames ended their 4-game losing streak. They split the lines up. They split the D. They looked a little bit more Daryl Sutter-y, if that's a word. But I'm not out here declaring the Flames are going to get back into the playoff race. But I will say, and this is even for the Canucks as well, the Canadians are on a 3-game losing streak. So, and the Flames do have 4 or 5 games against the Montreal Canadiens, and they are going to be their next game is against the Leafs, which is also another pretty tired team. They could make it interesting. Yeah. They have the possibility of making it interesting. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's why those last 2 games on what was the Canucks schedule, we don't know if it's going to continue to be. May still mean things, and they have to play them.
Yeah. I just think in a general comment on the game last night, I mean, you got to feel a little bit of relief or encouragement from the fact that it was Monahan, Gaudreau, Lindholm, and even Mark Giordano, who's been under fire, and at least on this podcast quite a bit this season. All of them registering last night. In regards to Edmonton, I mean, there was the Colby Cave celebration of life earlier in the day, but because of the Canucks situation, they then put the 2 Ottawa games back to back. They were in Montreal on Monday, then one day off to come back from out east, and now they're playing Calgary, another road game on the Saturday night. So I think it's like 4 and 6 nights or something like that. I mean, that's I guess we shouldn't be surprised that they were flat last night. I mean, the Oilers just clearly didn't have it.
Yeah. To be fair to everyone else, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the split. First of all, Mangiapane on the left, far more creative of a player than he is on the right. I think that's a good thing. And the lines looked good last night. Now, in terms of what the Flames do tomorrow, I honestly think they're going to do nothing. I don't think Sam Bennett has seemed to have, I wouldn't say thrived, but he's surviving under Daryl Sutter where he wasn't under Jeff Ward. I honestly don't think that there's as much interest out for David Riddick right now, especially when Devin Dubnyk got traded to Colorado. Derek Ryan, I think, is a guy that a lot of teams could be interested in. If there's one guy that I think, if you're another team, for sure. But I'm kind of on the side that for the Flames part of this, I don't see them doing much or anything tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it'll be, as you said, I think they're gonna make a run of this. They've got, especially after last night's win, I think they're gonna see what they can do. And I don't know if I don't know if they're gonna if what they get for those players would be. I would say it's any asset's asset, but I think it's just. I think you just got to see what you can do here and see if you can find a way to claw back into the race. And if, like I said, they've got a significant amount of games against Montreal, and you find a way to win all those games, and you're right back in it. Like it's a completely different situation than the Canucks, who are done playing Montreal. Yeah. So I think they are going to try and see what they can do. And you can argue whether or not asset management or anything like that is good, but yeah, I think it makes a lot of. I think if they can find a way to get back into it and make the race interesting, that'll at least make for some good entertainment down the stretch.
I have to ask this question. Is Brad Treliving's status worsened if they finish below Vancouver in the standings, or does it matter if it's more make the playoffs or not make the playoffs, or is he secure for next year? I mean, that's just to me the big elephant in the room when it comes to the Calgary Flames. I
think he's secure for next year. I think the ownership is okay with him there. There's not a hashtag thank you Brad thing going around. I was about to say Jim again, but that's Brad's dad. But they don't have the pressure from the fan base the way the Canucks seem to be with Jim Benning. So I think he's safe going into next year, and I think he's going to have all the ability to make the moves that he feels are good.
I think he gets this offseason. I do think that there's pressure on him. It wouldn't surprise me if he leaves, but I think him and Daryl Sutter gets this one kick of the can. This is his most important offseason. He's got to make it right. If by Christmas next year the Flames are not in a position they should be, he's out.
Yeah.
I do think that heat is starting to get there.
I think next year, you're right there, Kev, is when the pressure will start going on him. But right now there isn't.
Oh, Chris, you're on mute.
No. I was going to say right now, yeah, it's pretty much just at a simmer right now for Trey.
Yeah. I'll stand by it. Devin disagrees with me. I think he's the most overrated general manager in the NHL. I will give him credit. He tries to do some creative things, which we speak of Jim Benning. He doesn't all the time, but it hasn't always worked as well. And sometimes I think Jim Benning needs this from a Brad Treleaven's creativity, but I also think that Brad Treliving could use some of Jim Benning's conservativeness in sort of some way. We'll say
this is a gigantic what if, and Devin will hate it. But you look at the two big trades that Brad, like he's made 3 big trades, and one was acquiring Dougie Hamilton. The pick that he used, the first round pick that he used to acquire Dougie Hamilton, could have brought the Flames Matt Barzal. And then he made a trade for Travis Hominick. That was also for a first round pick. That first round pick is Noah Dobson. Where is this team with Matt Barzal at center instead of Elias Lindholm and Noah Dobson coming up through the ranks, as opposed to having Noah Hanifin?
I'll say one thing about Barzal, to be fair. He's been inconsistent on the island. I know that his numbers look good, but there's been times that Barry Trotz has had to sit him.
Yeah, but he's still a young player and one of the most skilled and fastest players in the league.
Yeah. Noah Dobson, that was a big miss for sure. You watch that guy, lanky, strong defenseman. Yes, that was
so.
That,
like I said,
yeah, but
big what if? But every time I think about the Flames, I think about that because I look at that. Like it's the same thing with Boston. What if? Because they had 3 picks in a row and they didn't have, like the Flames didn't need to pick Mark Barzal. They could have had Thomas Chabot. That would make Devin happy.
Yeah,
they would have had.
Devin would have loved Thomas Chabot.
They could have had Kyle Connor. Like there was a lot of talent that could have been picked at that pick. But yeah, that's just like I said, huge what if, and getting back on track. I think it's. I do think that come next year, that's when the pressure will really start to be put on the Flames and Brad Treliving to actually start making that step and to start building around this younger core.
Yeah, and that Monahan, Gaudreau, and what they do in these, that's very interesting there as well. Because we're getting a lot of questions in the comments. By the way, thank you for the comments. Let's get quickly through the NHL trade deadline here. We'll start with the Leafs. Let's start here. Goaltending wise, do they run with Campbell? We kind of started this a little bit already. Do they run with Campbell? Do they get a backup? Or do they go for the big fish? One name out there is Jonathan Quick. I'm not saying that that's it, but do they go for the starter and have Campbell as a backup, or are they rolling the dice?
I think that Campbell's got the net. I think that, can you imagine the reaction if they sort of veer off this course right now? I think he's got the net, but yeah, if he is going to be the goalie that takes them into the playoffs, the rest of the depth chart there with Freddie Anderson injured is obviously going to concern them. But I as we talked about earlier, I don't see them making a move for a guy like a Holtby who struggled this year just to have some insurance. And Jonathan Quick. I mean, I guess that's an interesting one. I mean, LA and Toronto have made a few deals, and Campbell and Quick work together there. So you could see that being a thing, perhaps. But I don't know. As I said earlier, I think the Leafs are going to tweak a little, but I think they're overall probably pretty happy with what they have right now.
I think they go after a goal. I don't know whether they go for a quote unquote starter or someone who can tandem with Jack Campbell, because Freddie Anderson, I don't know. I believe the expected return from his current injury is after the regular season ends. So I don't know what their plan is there, but Jack Campbell hasn't been able to stay healthy either. So when you look that and you have the potential that, well, not the potential, the winner of the North in the playoffs gets a Final Four berth.
Yeah. And
you've got a chance to go to the Cup final. Where the Leafs are, you cannot pass that chance up. You cannot just say, "Oh, we're gonna roll the dice with Jack Campbell." Like, yeah, he's playing well, but can he stay healthy? I think that's a huge question and a complete legitimate question that they have to answer. And I think they do need to go out and get another goaltender. And I also think they're going to try and get another forward.
If you're the Leafs and Chris, were you going to? Sorry, I just jumped in front of Chris. Okay.
No, I wasn't going to add anything. I'll plead ignorance in terms of the Leafs. I haven't watched them pretty much at all unless the Canucks have been playing them this season, so I don't really have much to add.
Okay, if you're the Leafs and your potential first-round matchup is either Connor Hellebuck, Carey Price, Jacob Markstrom, or Thatcher Demko, and you're going in with Jack Campbell, you do not have a goaltending edge. You can love Jack Campbell till the cows come home. He's not the goaltending edge for any of those four. Like if I'm any of those four teams, I know they've got firepower. I totally can respect that. But I believe that my goaltending can hold up and can take that to a 7-game series. So if you're the Leafs, I do think you have to at least look.
They have to be careful that this isn't like an Andrew Hammond situation back in whatever year it was, 2014-15, I think, with the Senators, where the guy clearly had the net. It's this great story. They're winning all these tight games, and then suddenly, when the lights get brighter in the postseason, the goalie doesn't look as good. They got to be careful that it's not that kind of a situation. But I mean, it took the Leafs quite a while to even just solve the issue of having a reliable backup goalie to begin with. I would say it's never been the Leafs' strength to really get good goaltending figured out in their organization. So we'll see how that one plays out. But yeah, I mean, you can't be all in on Jack Campbell. Like I say, I think they're pretty happy with letting him have the net at this point.
And I guess the other part is forward, not knowing what fully is going on with William Nylander if they get the top 6. But the other side of this, though, I know that a lot of people were raging about Zach Hyman being on somebody's Canadian Olympic team and TSN, and I can understand that. I don't think that that's that huge of a hot take, but I think that that'll be an interesting factor as well. Like
Rob Zabner. Are we just because Rob Zabner made the Olympic team one year?
I mean, there's always that. I know it's a bit of a tangent, but there's always that discussion of some guy on the Olympic team proposed or actually on the Olympic team that people think, how is he on the team? He's only on the team for this reason or that reason. I mean, this came up with Chris Kunitz on the Sochi team, and people didn't think that was right. And he's scoring in the gold medal game. So I don't know. People need to calm down about that whole Zach Hyman thing. I think, TSN and the Leafs and yada yada yada. I don't know. I don't think it's that crazy to make that suggestion though.
Yeah, I think
at least you're bringing in a player, Chris Kunitz, to play with your best player in Sidney Crosby.
Yeah,
is Mitch Marner the best player on Team Canada? No. He's definitely one of the better ones, but he's not the best. So but yeah, it is a tangent. But I think it's a crazy hot take, Kev. I don't think it's. There's so many other players out there that are just as gritty as Zach Hyman and more skilled that they could put out there.
Yeah, but Toronto, you gotta get your Torontos in there.
We love Toronto here on Hot.
Yes, we do. It's a lovely city.
Yeah. That's our favorite city. Shout out to Hot Take Hockey, who's in the chat as well, by the way. So yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. What the Leafs do at forward, I do think is going to be interesting. I mean, that will be with William Nylander as well. Let's go to we'll go top to bottom here. Let's go to Winnipeg. They've got to get a defenseman, and they have to and that is unfortunately, I think the Savard trade. I think Winnipeg missed out on that, but. They can't. I know that everyone is like the Oilers have 2 good players, but unfortunately, those 2 good players are the best in the world. And if that is your first round matchup, oh boy, with that defense, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm only saying that.
Right, you're really counting on Hellebuck.
Yeah, they definitely need to add someone and not Montour's off the board, Savard's off the board. I'm trying to pull up who's available, who would be a quote unquote rental or someone like that they could maybe go after, but I don't. After those guys are off, after those two are off the board, I don't know who else they could realistically get, because everyone else seems to be kind of in the maybe Ryan Murray. I don't know. It's tough. They're gonna have to get a little creative because they definitely need to shore up that blue line if they're gonna try and make a run here. And Connor Hellebuyck's playing really well, and you can't waste that season with Connor Hellebuyck. So I think you need to find a way to go for it because, as we said with the Leafs, once you get out of the North Division, you're in the Final Four, and at that point, you've got a 25% chance of finding a way to win the cup at that. And could you imagine like the party in Winnipeg if they manage to pull this off, and there's the COVID restrictions allow for a big parade at Portage in Maine? Like, could you imagine? I still remember watching Winnipeg celebrate when they got the Jets back.
Yeah.
Like, I can vividly see it in my mind, and I could see it being an absolute insane fun celebration if they can find a way to do it. And this is a year that they have a chance, and if they can solidify that blue line, then there's going to be a good. They can drastically improve their chances.
Kevin Cheveldayoff's job security with the Jets never gets talked about, but I have to wonder, where that's at, and whether that's going to influence his desire to be aggressive at the deadline here. I mean, he's been the general manager ever since the Thrashers moved to Winnipeg, and ownership seems to be very patient with whatever course of action he takes. But this is their 10-year celebration season of being back in Winnipeg, and if they look like they got a team that can go deep in the playoffs here, then they got to do something to add to the group now and make a run at it here. Josh
Manson's out there.
He'd be a good guy to pick up for the playoffs. Big gritty defenseman.
Yeah. There's also sorry, I had another name on my little list here. Jamie Oleksiak, depth guy for sure, but big guy, good size. Yeah.
Penny's brother it would be a good pickup for them.
Yeah. By the way, we'll quickly just to go back here. I don't agree with Hyman. Guys like Mark Stone are there in terms of defensive matchups. PK. I do agree with Hyman's where not many guys like him forecheck / puck retrieval. So there you go. You have some support there, Sean.
No, he's disagreeing with me.
Oh, he's disagreeing. Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So let me get back. Yeah. So Edmonton. Did we finish with Winnipeg?
Yeah, I think it's blue line. They need to add to the blue line for sure. They made their big move with Dubois, and now if they can find a way to add a defenseman that can help them out and put players in spots to succeed, because I think that's part of the issue with the Jets is they've got some good young defensemen, but they're not quite ready for the big minutes, and they need someone to help shoulder the load with Pionk and Morrissey, who are playing way too much and put in positions that aren't helping them out.
Yeah. So the Oilers, the name Taylor Hall and the Oilers. Is there a reunion? I don't think the Oilers should be doing this personally.
Not this year. If they want to find a way to do it in the off season, I think that's when they should do it.
I'm going to come out and say I don't think they see him as a fit in that dressing room anymore.
I agree.
That's the other thing.
Yeah. So I think just on that alone, that's not going to happen.
I have a question about Taylor Hall. Is he considered a cancer at this point? Because with how often he's been bouncing around.
I don't think so. I think you can have that question. You can put that out there, but I can't go that far. You look at
I'm not trying to say it is. I'm just putting the question out there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You look at what he's been the shit storms he's been in. Like, he was part of that debacle in Edmonton back then. Like, they're starting to figure it out now, but back then it was an absolute gong show. Then he
Jersey,
went
and
to
then Arizona. Yeah.
Jersey, Arizona, now Buffalo. Like, it's just like,
Yeah. Well,
and
Taylor Hall
you
had
have-
some. He had some pretty negative comments after he got dealt from Edmonton about how things went there during his 6 years, and kind of giving the impression that they kind of wasted the 6 years with him there. So it just seems very far fetched to me that they'd want to bring him back.
Yeah. If you're the Oilers, there's not much you can do, but I do think defensive depth has to be up there and bottom six forward. I know that the name Derek Ryan came up in Edmonton. I could see why they would do that. There's Luke Glendening, but I think bottom six forward or depth on defense need to be it.
I think it's bottom six forward and goaltending.
That's it. I was about to ask, do we believe that Mike Smith can do this?
Smith or Koskinen, and
Yeah, I mean, they got Alex Stalock there too, I guess, as a bit of an
that's right.
insurance
They could probably
policy.
Stalock.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's priority one's defense and then forward depth after that.
Yeah, I agree.
Montreal.
No, I'm actually okay with the Oilers defense. I think the issue is more the defensive depth up front, the responsibility up front from the forwards. I think that's the bigger issue. You've got on the blue line Tyson Barrie. Yeah, he's a bit of a defensive liability, but Darnell Nurse has turned into a stud. I'll take the L on that one. Devin will like to hear that I'm admitting I was wrong on something. Darnell Nurse has turned into Darnell Nurse is a really good top pair defenseman, and then they've got Ethan Bears. I think they've got a decent blue line. I think if they get them playing at the top of their game, I don't think you need an addition. If you can find one for cheap, that's great. But I think I think the priority should be finding a third line center, because they just waived Kyle Turris again.
Yeah. By the way, back to hot take hockey here quickly. No, I'm agreeing. I'm saying Hyman doesn't belong on the team. So there you go.
Good. Okay. That's clear.
Montreal. Now, I will. We had this discussion about Carey Price. Just thinking about it, he's whether his stats are good or not, he's still a presence that can win you a cup. I'm not saying this probably will be, if you're going to make the run, if you're Montreal, this will be the year to do it. I'm not a big fan of their center depth. They acquired John Merrill. They're improving on their defense depth. They seem to be in on Mike Hoffman. I don't know about that. I think they could use some center depth. They acquired Eric Stahl. They could use a little bit more. They're the team. If I'm surprised that I haven't heard them linked to Derek Ryan, actually, because they could really use a Derek Ryan there.
Yeah, just quickly going back to Carey Price, it looks like just saw this article from Sportsnet that was posted a few days ago. It sounds like they're expecting him back later on this upcoming week. So I think that's good for them. But yeah, their center depth has been a question all season. Yes, they've got Philip Deneau, who I think is an underrated player. He took forever to score a few goals this year, but he's still a very strong sort of middle six center. Nick Suzuki's going to be a top line center in this league in the coming years, but he's not quite there yet. Kotkaniemi's been shifted to the wing now with the addition of Eric Stahl. As if they are planning to go right for this year, yes, you pick up another center. But if your plan is to maybe go at it maybe next year as well, you want Suzuki and Kotkaniemi to be getting these playoff experience at center. So maybe they sit tight there with that, unless they can find a steal of a deal that can add to their depth.
if we look at general manager decisions and trends over a season, it sure looks like Montreal would be the most active of the Canadian teams going into this trade deadline. It sure feels to me like, and I'm not connected enough with what's going on in Montreal, but it sure feels to me like they looked at last year in the bubble as a step forward, and they wanted to keep making progress on that this year. Now, I mean, still, looking at Toronto and Edmonton, and I guess Montreal feels they probably match up okay against the Oilers. The Leafs, it's a little more difficult, but I definitely think Montreal is looking at making a deep run in these playoffs, and Marc Bergevin has not been waiting around to make changes.
Yeah. Ottawa. I know that we've pretty much have said that they're done. They're obviously done. They were not expected to make the playoffs. Ray Ferraro had a really interesting idea a couple of weeks ago that they should have gone in if on some of these deals that should acquired some of these assets to do what Detroit did, basically get this David Savard from Columbus, trade them to Tampa to get an asset. Ottawa should have been doing the same thing. I think it's a little bit too late for them to do that now. I mean, the big question would be Matt Murray, which I don't think they're going to protect. Maybe someone will want Erica Branson, maybe. But
hey, no one's taking Matt Murray with that contract.
No, that's true.
Yeah. But good Branson, I think he's a UFA this year. He'd be there. He's got the size and build that you want for a depth defenseman on a cup run. So if they can find a suitor for someone like him, I think that would be good. Ray Ferraro was right. They should be in on this cap laundering ideas that Detroit's been doing. They have done it before. They did it with Tampa this summer. They acquired I think a pick or two, and then got some players that they actually play for them, for injured players that aren't even playing for Tampa. So they have done it in the past. I think there's still spots available for them to do so. But I think it's tinkering around the edges, trying to acquire more assets if they can. See what they've also have signed Jacob Bernard-Docker and Shane Pinto to ELCs over this past week, and you want to see what they have going forward. So you want to be able to give the young kids ice time over the next until the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Ottawa, the obvious one is they got to address their goaltending. Matt Murray, I think he's done it. I don't see him regaining his past form, so that's a bit of a problem. What do you do with that contract? But I think overall they're looking at this season as a bit of a progression. I mean, it started off very poorly, but I think they've got to be pretty pleased with their young core, particularly Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle, and trying to go from there and improve on that. It's amazing. Although Ottawa is 0-for against Vancouver and Edmonton, they still seem to compete really well against Toronto and Montreal. So, they gotta be optimistic about that. I agree with Sean. Some tweaks to try and add to the group, but whatever selling they do is not going to be anything that's big.
Yeah, I completely agree in terms of the sense. Yeah.
Can I throw a scenario at you that might be ridiculous, but what do you think of Freddie Anderson in Ottawa next year?
No, I don't see that. I think they're high on Joey Decord, as well as who else? The other goalie that they've got, Hogberg. I think they're going to see what they have with those two before they do that, because again, Matt Murray is 6.25 for the next 3 years after this year. Is anyone taking that on? Unless Ottawa's retaining 50%, because Matt Murray at 3.125. That's actually something that someone could be a team could be interested in.
Yeah, I don't see Eugene Melnick allowing retained salary transactions. It just doesn't seem like a Melnick
but that's the other issue.
Yeah.
So they're with the 6.25 that they've locked in with Matt Murray. They are not going out. I don't see them going after a big name goaltender going forwards, especially when I know they're high on Joey Decord and Marcus Hogberg.
Fair. Let's go quickly around the NHL. Any other team you're intrigued what they're going to do in the South?
Minnesota. I'm very interested to see what Minnesota does. They've completely outkicked their coverage this year and are solidly in third place in that West Division. And John from Hot Take Hockey, it's Philip Gustafson that they are. Right. Ottawa is high on not Hogberg. But Minnesota is someone I'm interested in. They're a team I'm going to be following going into this. They seem to be able to cause absolute fits for Colorado and Vegas. And even though those two teams I think we can all agree are significantly but more talented, but Kirill Kaprizov is turning into one hell of a player. Kevin Fiala looks like he's starting to find his groove again, and that blue line is still really good. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at acquiring some center depth.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just looking at the Central Division there, Nashville and Chicago and Dallas. I mean, that's going to be tight going down the stretch here. And Chicago, we've talked about it on the podcast here before. Despite not having Taves and Kirby Dach and what they've been doing there, are they in a go for it mode to try and push for that last spot and make a run at it? Very curious to see how Chicago does. Dallas is in the same boat. I mean, they were in the final last year. I imagine they want to make another run at the playoffs here. So that's going to be an interesting couple of places to watch as well come the trade deadline.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, as far as I think Colorado is starting to really hedge their bets and potentially go all in this season. Like picking up Dubnyk is probably gonna put them over the edge on top of how well they're already doing. So I'm quite intrigued to see how well Colorado does post trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
My team would be the Carolina Hurricanes. They're currently tied with the Lightning, the defending champions. This is the final year of Rod DeBod's contract. I'm not going to flex like Rod DeBod, but if they add a couple of pieces, if it is Carolina, Tampa Bay, that might be the best series of the entire playoffs. That might be the Pittsburgh. That might be Pittsburgh, the old Pittsburgh, Washington, Crosby versus Ovechkin. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Carolina's one to watch. They've got a whack ton of cap space, and it's real cap space. It's not LTIR. So I could see them getting. Thanks, Tyler.
This is the hill Sean's dying on is cap circumvention.
Yeah,
with the LTIR.
Well, hey, look, if you have an injured player and you use that to replace him, fine. That's fine. It's the trading of injured players to create more cap space for the acquiring team that I don't like.
It's the Toronto level.
Tampa did it again. Tampa and Ottawa pulled off a trade in the offseason that allowed Tampa to keep all their players. The whole point of the cap is so that players move and you create more parity. And when you allow that stuff, that's what gets rid of it. But going back to Carolina, how healthy is that blue line? Do they need to get some more depth pieces on the blue line to help them out? Because when that blue line is healthy, I don't know if there's a better blue line out there. You got Dougie Hamilton, Jacob Slavin, two absolute stud top pair defensemen in completely different ways, which is great because you got offensive Dougie Hamilton and defensive wizard in Jacob Slavin. Then you've got Brady Shea and Brett Pesce, very, very underrated defenseman in my opinion. They're paying Jake Gardner a lot of money, but hopefully he can be a good sort of bottom pair guy. And then they've got Jake Bean and Hayden Fleury as some younger defensemen that can step up as well. So but I just don't know how healthy they are, because I remember, Kevin, you talked about this, I think, last week, about how they need to pick up some defense. I'm like, really, Carolina? And then I looked, and like half their blue line was on injured reserve. So how healthy is that blue line?
Yeah.
Another interesting team to keep an eye on, Florida. Like, I'm not sure about you guys, but they have surprised the hell out of me this season as far as how consistent and strong they've been.
Well, they just signed Nikita Gusev to a 1 year, $1 million deal. That's going to help them. They acquired Brandon Montour. I wouldn't be surprised if they still go after another defenseman because Aaron Ekblad is out with that just gruesome injury. And we'll see what happens there. But yeah, they're a team to watch as well.
One player I'm watching very quickly. I'm very intrigued. The name Ryan Getzlaf suddenly came up. I don't know if he's moving, but man, I think I would be calling Anaheim about Ryan Getzlaf. He's a proven playoff performer. He's got a cup ring. He would help somebody.
If he's moving, he's definitely a get for sure.
He's currently on their injured reserve as per cap friendly, so I don't know exactly how healthy he is. There would definitely have to be some cap retention or cap laundering to make that deal work. He makes $8.25 million on the cap, so that's a big contract to acquire without any sort of moving around of cap assets to make it for a team to do that.
Yeah. All right. We will be back tomorrow. Actually, we will do a live trade deadline recap. Devin, Sean, and I. Anyway, I don't know if Chris and Tyler will be on. I know Mondays are.
Chris, take yourself off mute.
Yeah. Work permitting, as far as me being on.
Yeah, work will not permit me being on, so I can just tell you that right now.
Fine. But we'll leave it there for now. As I said, the live tomorrow night. How do we follow everyone?
I am Beardy Canucks 03 on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter at TNoble, TNOBLE.
I am at Schneids on most social media.
Devin is GordHowe09, where he currently has 40. We should do jersey numbers for Devin's Twitter following as well, actually. Kevole, KEVOLE, podcast_hockey, Facebook.com, YouTube.com. Subscribe and like us there. Tell your friends about us. Subscribe on the podcast as well. And thanks, everyone. We will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.